Have you ever questioned what factors led to one of the most grim periods in American history, the Civil War? Let's take a step back to the 1850s. The United States was a fledgling nation, just about a century old, but profound divisions were already emerging. The seeds of conflict were planted long before the initial shots were fired in 1861, and they sprouted from disagreements that were economic, social, political, and ethical. In the North, by the 1840s, the quick pace of industrialization was forming an economy that heavily relied on factories and wage labor. The South, however, remained predominantly agrarian, its economy deeply rooted in agriculture and reliant on the labor of enslaved individuals. These economic differences, evident by the 1850s, gave birth to social disparities. The North saw the emergence of thriving cities and a growing middle class, while the South was controlled by a noble class of large plantation owners. However, the most contentious issue in the mid-19th century was the argument of states' rights versus federal authority. The South vehemently defended the concept of states' rights, insisting that each state should possess the power to decide its own laws and regulations, including those pertaining to slavery. The North, conversely, endorsed a robust federal government that could impose laws evenly across all states. And then slavery came into focus in the 1850s. It was the elephant in the room. The issue that everyone acknowledged was central to the discord, but many were hesitant to tackle directly. The North, with its burgeoning abolitionist movement, viewed slavery as a moral atrocity that needed to be abolished. The South, however, saw it as a necessary evil, crucial to their lifestyle and their economy. These differences and disagreements, evident by the late 1850s, didn't merely cause friction. They ignited a type of Cold War, a festering conflict that would eventually erupt into open warfare. The stage was set by 1860 for a nation divided, a nation teetering on the edge of ripping itself asunder. These tensions set the stage for a conflict that would tear the nation apart. On April 11, 1861, the tension boiled over into outright conflict at Fort Sumter. It was during the early morning hours of this day that the first shots of the Civil War rang out. The Confederate forces, under the command of Brigadier General P.G.T. Beauregard, had demanded the Union garrison's surrender. When Major Robert Anderson, the Union commander, refused, the Confederates launched their first attack. The battle raged for more than a day, with cannon fire echoing across Charleston Harbor. Despite the intensity of the bombardment, the Union forces held their ground. Yet, it was a battle they could not win. Low on supplies and outnumbered, Anderson had little choice but to surrender. On April 13th, after 34 hours of continuous bombardment, the Union flag over Fort Sumter was lowered, and the Confederate flag was raised in its place. The fall of Fort Sumter was a watershed moment. It was the transition from political disagreements and threats of secession to actual bloody conflict. The news of the Union's surrender spread like wildfire, reaching President Lincoln in the Capitol. The president understood the gravity of the situation and, in response, issued a call for 75,000 volunteers to suppress the rebellion. This call to arms, however, had an unintended consequence. It led to the secession of 4 more southern states, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, who refused to raise arms against their fellow Southerners. The Battle of Sumter was a relatively small event with no casualties during the bombardment and only a few during the evacuation. Yet, its significance cannot be understated. It was the spark that ignited the powder keg, leading to a war that would last 4 long years and claim more than 600,000 lives. The events of that significant April morning in 1861, in a fort in the middle of Charleston Harbor, set the stage for the bloodiest conflict in American history. With the attack of Fort Sumter on April 13th, the Civil War had officially begun. The initial phase of the Civil War, from 1861 to 1862, was marked by notable Confederate victories. These years were a period of high hopes for the South, and they brought bitter disappointments for the North. During this time, strategic battles began to shape the course of the war. On July 21, 1861, the First Battle of Bull Run took place. This was the first major land battle of the war, and ended in a Confederate victory. It jolted the Union into the harsh reality that the war would be neither quick nor easy. Then on September 17, 1862, the Battle of Antietam occurred. It was the bloodiest single-day battle in American history. and though technically a tactical draw, it was a strategic Union victory. However, the gruesome casualty numbers reaching into the thousands underscored the ferocity of this conflict. Under the leadership of Confederate figures like Robert E. Lee and Thomas Stonewall Jackson, the South demonstrated impressive military skill. Lee's audacious tactics and strategic mind from 1862 until 1865 became the foundation of the Confederate war effort. And Jackson, known for his relentless pursuit of victory, earned his nickname Stonewall for his refusal to yield to Union forces at Bull Run in 1861. These early years signified a period of trial and error, of daring moves and desperate gambits. The Confederacy, despite being disadvantaged in resources and manpower, often emerged victorious, which fueled their hopes for independence. However, it's crucial to note that despite these initial setbacks, the Union was far from defeated. In the face of adversity, it was consolidating its forces, learning from its mistakes, and gearing up for the prolonged struggle. These early years of the Civil War were just the beginning of a story that was far from over. They were a time of chaos and victory, of despair and determination, and above all, they were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In 1863, the tide of the Civil War began to favor the Union. This pivotal year, 1863, brought forth two significant events that shifted the momentum towards the North. The first was the Emancipation Proclamation, issued by President Lincoln on January 1, 1863. More than just a political statement, this proclamation was a strategic masterstroke that transformed the war from a fight for union into a struggle for freedom. The proclamation declared all enslaved persons in the Confederate-held territories as free, a move that had profound implications for the morale of the Union troops and the Southern economy, which relied heavily on slave labor. Besides fighting the Union Army, the Confederacy now faced the threat of a potential slave uprising. Next, we move to the battlefield. The Battle of Gettysburg, fought from July 1 to 3, 1863, was the most lethal battle of the Civil War. Despite the significant loss of lives, the Union Army managed to emerge victorious, serving as a significant turning point in the war. The Union's triumph at Gettysburg halted the Confederacy's progression into the North, giving the Union a boost in morale and momentum. Moreover, the Union's strategic advantages, including its larger population, industrial capacity, and expansive railroad network, began to show their relevance. These benefits, which peaked in 1863, were instrumental in allowing the Union to maintain its armies and continue the war effort longer than the Confederacy could sustain. The victories at Gettysburg and another strategically significant location, Vicksburg, were like a 1-2 punch that shook the Confederacy. Vicksburg, a strategic fortress city on the Mississippi River, fell to the Union on the same day as Gettysburg, July 4, 1863, effectively splitting the Confederacy in two and handing control of the river to the Union. The Union's victories at Gettysburg and Vicksburg on July 4 marked a major turning point in the war. The latter part of the Civil War, ranging from 1863 to 1865, saw the Union forces making significant strides towards victory. This period was marked by a series of key events that tipped the balance in favor of the Union. Let's delve into some of these decisive moments in detail. One of the most significant of these was Sherman's March to the Sea from November 15 to December 21, 1864. General William Tecumseh Sherman led his troops on a devastating campaign across Georgia, from Atlanta to Savannah. This march was a scorched earth tactic designed to devastate the Confederacy's ability to wage war and cripple their morale. In tandem with Sherman's march, the siege of Petersburg was unfolding in Virginia. This pivotal, grueling battle extended from June 15, 1864 to March 25, 1865. The Union forces, under the command of General Ulysses S. Grant, aimed to isolate the Confederate capital, Richmond, from the rest of the South. Despite robust resistance, the Confederacy was unable to lift the siege. The surrender of Petersburg in April 1865 laid the groundwork for the capture of Richmond, the very core of the Confederacy. However, these final years weren't solely about military maneuvering. From 1861 to 1865, the Confederacy was also wrestling with significant political hurdles. The Confederate government, under President Jefferson Davis, was struggling with internal conflicts, a collapsing economy, and scarce resources. Despite Davis's efforts, maintaining the morale of the Confederates and the unity of his troops was proving increasingly challenging. These struggles reached a head on a silent Palm Sunday, April 9, 1865. In the small town of Appomattox, Virginia, Confederate Army's General Robert E. Lee met with General Grant, and in a move that resounded across the nation, Lee surrendered. This act, while a deeply distressing moment for the South, marked the closure of the most devastating conflict in American history. On April 9, 1865, General Lee surrendered to General Grant at Appomattox, effectively ending the Civil War. The end of the Civil War in 1865 marked a new era in American history. Its aftermath, unfolding from 1865 to 1877, was as tumultuous as the war itself. The nation was left with deep physical and emotional scars, and the task of healing was monumental. Just 5 days after the surrender on April 14, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln, the leader who had navigated the nation through its most perilous journey, was assassinated. His death sent shockwaves through the already reeling nation. The task of reconstruction, spanning from 1865 to 1877, fell to his successor, Andrew Johnson, a man ill-equipped for the magnitude of the task. The South had been devastated, its economy in ruins. The task of rebuilding was immense. Between 1865 and 1870, newly freed slaves were left to navigate a society that was still hostile to their very existence. The promise of equality seemed a distant dream. But during the same years, Reconstruction also saw significant strides. The 13th Amendment, 1865, 14th Amendment, 1868, and 15th Amendment, 1870, to the Constitution abolished slavery, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized in the United States, and gave the right to vote to all male citizens regardless of race, respectively. These amendments laid the groundwork for future civil rights movements. The Civil War also left an indelible mark on American politics, fundamentally transforming the relationship between the states and the federal government. By 1869, the war affirmed the supremacy of the federal government in matters of national importance. The war had long-lasting effects on American society as well. By 1877, it ended the institution of slavery, forever changing the social fabric of the nation. It set the stage for the civil rights movements of the 20th century, movements that continue to shape American society today. The legacy of the Civil War, spanning from 1861 to 1865 and beyond, is complex and multifaceted. It was a war that brought about profound change, a war that tested the very fabric of the nation. It was a war that forced America to confront its contradictions, to reconcile its ideals of liberty and equality with the harsh reality of slavery and discrimination. The Civil War forever shaped the course of American history, its echoes resonating even today. From its roots in economic and social tension to its bloody conclusion in 1865, the Civil War was a defining moment in American history. We've journeyed through a timeline filled with struggle and triumph, from the prelude to war, marked by escalating tensions in the 1850s, to the opening shots at Fort Sumter in 1861 that signaled the start of a nation divided. We've explored the early years, spanning from 1861 to 1863, where strategies were formed and alliances shifted, leading to the turning of the tide. We've delved into the final years from 1863 to 1865, culminating in the eventual surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. This time was followed by a nation forever changed. We've also discussed the aftermath and legacy, the profound impact this war had on the United States, shaping its future and leaving an indelible mark on its history. This in-depth exploration of the Civil War has revealed its complexity, its tragedy, and its enduring influence. Thank you for journeying through this pivotal time in history with us. Remember, understanding our past is crucial to shaping our future.